So, normally, my whole life, I always have gone into a massive, like, crippling, grand depression annually around my birthday. It usually starts a couple of months before my birthday, and I am just a dark, dark person. And, this has been a true thing since I was probably about 12 or 13, and I think 12. I think 12 actually, because 11 was, so yeah, it would be 12. And I mean, I'm in my 30s now, and it's just been this very predictable, it's gonna happen thing. A lot of people reflect on their lives at New Year's. I always do at my birthday. I always reflect on what I could have done better, on my regrets, on things like that. So that doesn't help. New Year's for me is more like, hey, here's my goals I'm gonna pursue, and here's what I'm sick of, and I'm gonna change. I get very motivated to just be like, you know what, here's what I did well this year. I'm proud of myself. Pat on the back. Like here, looking at the last year, I've done this and this and this. That's amazing. I'm gonna have a lot of those probably with all this transness. Actually, when I get to New Year's, it's gonna be like, wow, look at how far you've come. Like this has been definitely a year of transformation for me. No pun intended. um, but I haven't gone into my big, deep, dark depression, which, um, it's September 15th, and my birthday, is October 5th. So it's coming up, and last year, if I remember right, I was only depressed for a couple of weeks as well, and the year before that. So it has gotten smaller, so maybe it'll still happen, but I don't know. I don't feel even a little bit like that, and it's strange because I'm apart from our girlfriend for the first time in months and months. I could be depressed about that, and I'm sad about it, but I'm not depressed. And, the state of the country makes me feel depressed sometimes, but it's not like a grand wall depression. Grand wall's probably not the right word, but whatever. I live in a constant state of dysthymia, whatever it's called, like nonstop, all the time. But it's not the same. I'm talking the kind of depression where I'm curled up in a fetal position and I can't move and I'm just staring and tears leak out my eyes, but no one knows if I'm crying or if my eyes are just watering or if I'm just freaking out and I just can't move or talk or I mean, and it's just terrible. And then I go try to be in front of people and I'm trying to put on the surface happy that I do for people to try to make them feel better and shit. And I'm still crying in front of them and they all just have to awkwardly try to ignore it. And I have no energy and I'm just not happy. But I try to just be there for them anyway. And then I immediately go back to my fetal position. Like, terrible depression. And, get suicidal ideation, unfortunately, in the past, there's been times I self-harmed. Like, it is not a good depression at all. But it's not here yet. And again, in the last 2 years, it wasn't here for 2 months or even a month. It was here for a few weeks. But it's to the point where it is a couple of weeks. It's 2 weeks? Maybe 25. Yeah, it's like 2 weeks. But I don't know, it's been getting better. So maybe I'm just starting to get better. I it might have even been the last 3 years. It's only been a couple of weeks. I just haven't had a lot of positivity around my birthday most of my life. I did when I was very little. When I was very little, for whatever reason, even though I can remember almost every single thing about my life, I do not remember my second, third, or fourth birthdays. So whatever happened at them, they were apparently pretty boring. I vaguely have an idea of a bunch of adults being around and maybe some cousins, and I don't really remember anything significant about them at all. Like, I just have a couple of flashes of people, and that's like literally it. Um, the first birthday I can like genuinely remember was my fifth one, and I thought I was so clever because I stole all the balloons and I sat in this chair and I thought it was my little throne and that I was the king of the balloons. And nobody, I don't know why I thought that. I don't know why I did that, but I thought I was very clever and I thought I was very conniving and I was very pleased with myself. Um, and I don't even know if I got all the balloons because I think some of the balloons were way up high on like wall corners or things like that, but I got all the balloons I could reach, which was still enough to make me happy with myself. Whatever. Um, I don't remember having pretty much anything going on for my sixth birthday, but we had moved from Alaska to Washington at that point, and we lived in this little dinky trailer, and it wasn't really whatever. For my seventh birthday, we lived in a really nice fancy trailer in a suburb, and it was like the nicest place we ever lived in my entire growing up years until my dad later, after the divorce and everything, and he married again to my mom. They got a house, um, and that house is probably the nicest place I ever lived when I was growing up. And they still have that house, although my father's trying to force my mom to get rid of it all of a sudden. But anyway, well, I don't know. They've talked about selling it before, but he's trying to force her to do all the work to get rid of it all of a sudden. Anyway, that's besides the point. I've already made a video about how angry I am at him, and I still am angry at him, so I'm not going to talk about it right now because I've already had birthdays. My seventh birthday, like I remember really strongly. I got like a little Precious Moments doll. I got, well, it wasn't a doll, it was like a pillow shaped like a character. Anyway, my friends all came. At the age of like 5 to 7, I had like my best friend group that I ever had in my entire life. Honestly, it was my only real friend group that I ever had in my entire life. Um, they were children my own age, and there was boys and girls that I was friends with. The girls all had crushes on me. I had two girlfriends, not one, but two girlfriends, although I didn't know that that's what they were, but I mean, that's what they were, flat out. And like, nobody knew about it and stuff, and I had like all the respect of the children group and stuff, and none of them were old enough yet to care that I didn't fit into a boy or a girl role, that I was very outdoorsy and building forts and strong and making swords out of wood and sharpening them on the pavement and being like, strong and stuff. And the girls just thought I was to die for. And then the boys were, they respected me. And oh, if I'm protecting the girls, they better run away. Like they would try to sneak pranks onto the girls, but they knew better than to cross me. And it was just like this wonderful dynamic. And then sometimes I'd just be hanging with the boys and playing with Star Trek figures and reading Ninja Turtle comics. And we'd all be just playing together, and it was all like awesome. And I was very accepted, even though I didn't fit into a role. Um, when we left to go back to Alaska, right after, I turned 7, it wasn't very long after that, and my parents went bankrupt again, and we had to go back to Alaska to live in the garage again. And um, I mean, it was a garage that had been turned somewhat into a home. Like it was livable. It wasn't like the first time we lived there. We actually, like had beds, and it had been done up more. But at the same time, we were completely poor, like poverty poor. And we went to school. Oh, that's the thing. I was never in a school for more than 2 years in my entire life. Any school that I've ever been to. I just sort of went from one public school to the other. I started out apparently homeschooling, although I never was aware that I was homeschooling at all when I was little. But I didn't start school till the first grade. But I was as smart or smarter than the other kids, so it worked out. But I had no idea I'd been homeschooling. I don't know if that's a thing my mother made up or something, but whatever. She might not have too, and just never explained it to me. I have no idea. But anyway, so first grade was in Washington, and then second and third grade was in Alaska, and then fourth and fifth grade was at one school in Tennessee, and then sixth and seventh grade was at a different school in Tennessee. And then when I was about to go into eighth grade, I was being bullied so severely at that point. And I very obviously liked girls at that point. And there was a lesbian who had failed the eighth grade and had to redo it. And I would have been in class with her. And all of it compounded into you're just being homeschooled for the rest of your school time. So when I graduated high school, I never had done anything that you would do in high school. Never been to prom. There's no such thing as a homecoming. Like, I basically taught myself. Like, my mother tried a little bit with some things, but for the most part, I literally just taught myself. Anyway, back to when I was little. When we left to go to Alaska and stuff, it wasn't school time yet. But my mother started the affair, so we went back to live in the ghetto in Washington just to get away from the pedophile she wanted to marry. And she wanted to marry him because she could see all of the nice things that he had, and she didn't want to live in squalor. And we shouldn't have moved into the ghetto. The walls were brown, the building was brown, the couches were brown, the carpet was brown, everything was brown. She was so completely and utterly depressed, living in an even worse condition than we lived in the backwoods of Alaska in a garage that had been converted a little bit inside to be more functional as a house. Like, it was miserable. Absolutely miserable there. But it was there that I started to realize that my days of being accepted were kind of over. There was basically no children to play with, and the children that were there to play with were just as poor and impoverished as you were. So they didn't have any kind of hierarchy based on who's the richest or anything like that. Instead, it was basically just us little group of poor kids, and the majority of them were unfortunately African American. Um, and it's sad because even then, the people forced into poverty, the ratio was still higher toward African Americans, but I didn't understand any of that when I was a child. I just knew these were the kids to play with. But they were used to living in the ghetto. We were used to being poor, but we were not used to living in the ghetto. So when the gunfires would go off in the background, someone get shot, we'd be like, and they'd be like, what's your problem? Someone didn't pay their drug money. Come on, let's go. It it was not a big deal to them. So they had a little more of a strength that if they had come to visit us in the woods, we would have had a little bit more of a strength with the woods, and they would have been like, eh. So it was just a difference of environment. Up to that point, I had only ever lived in the woods or else in a little suburb thing. I had never lived in a ghetto. So there were no trees. That was a problem for me because, when I was scared or when I was trying to get away from my parents or I was trying to get away from abusive situations before, I would usually climb a tree and I would feel safer. There had been a group of boys in Washington who would try to catch little girls and do things to them. And they had always respected me and backed off from me because I wouldn't let them. Like, they'd try to stick their tongue in my mouth, and I would hold my lips together so tight and just glare at them until they backed off, and they were like, fine, get away, And so this little gang of boys didn't try to do stuff to me that they did to other girls in the neighborhood. And I didn't know at the time, I mean, I was, 6, how to protect the other girls, but I knew how to keep them off of me because they were expecting me to act like a girl, and I didn't act like a girl. And when I got to the ghetto, that was a bad thing. The girls acted like girls, and the boys acted like boys. And I didn't. I wanted to play Nerf arrows with the boys, and they wouldn't let me. And the girls just wanted to, like, braid each other's hair and stuff, and I didn't want to do that. So instead of playing, I think it was within like 2 weeks, I took my scissors and cut a big hole in the hedges because there was no trees, and I would crawl into the hole in the hedges, and my brothers would go play, and I would hide in the hedges by myself and, like, draw or read a book or something. And my mother thought we were all out playing, and I wasn't because the kids didn't accept me. And I thought, well, this is just because we're here, and these kids are just mean, and this is just the way it is, and whatever. And then we got dragged back to Alaska to live with my mother's new husband. She kidnapped us and shit, and, like, actually literally kidnapped us and took us up there and made us call him Dad. And I started up school, and one of my classmates was even going to be my cousin for 2nd grade. And I was like, yay, this is going to be better. And, it won't be the same as my friends that I had in Washington, which I still wrote to, but it wasn't. It was terrible. Even though it wasn't the ghetto, even though I was living back in the woods in Alaska, the kids still wanted the girls to act like girls and the boys to act like boys. And it was actually more strictly that way than it had been in the ghetto. The girls only could play with certain toys. The boys only could play with certain toys on the playground. And I wasn't allowed to play with any of them. So I just made up my own game, and I started playing snow horses, and I would literally crawl around in the snow for the entirety of recess and pretend that I was a horse by myself until I made a friend who would do it with me. Like, because she loved horses. No one wanted me around, and my cousin was embarrassed by me because I didn't act like the other girls. They all wanted to, make cute pictures and stuff, and me, I wanted to make magnets go on either side of the desk and make things move and stuff. And then I was literally the only girl who did something like that. But the boys all made like mechanical things. And then I got in trouble for that. I got in trouble for my school project. The teacher got mad at me and gave me a bad grade. I got a bunch of bad grades in the second grade solely because I didn't fit into the proper roles. I remember one time I was making a big giant like picture, and it was for a contest, and the teacher took it away from me early and wouldn't let me finish it. And I was so angry. I was so like livid about it that I snuck out into the hallway during class and pretended I had to go to the bathroom and put some markers in my pocket, and I went and finished my picture on the wall while it was hanging there because I was so angry because she didn't want me to get a good grade and she didn't want me to win the contest. I got third place in her face. Like, they brought a horse there one time, and I was so excited about the horse. And I was like, let's ride it, let's be cowboys. And the girls were all like, no, we're gonna comb its mane. And I was like, okay, I'll comb its mane, and then we get to ride it, right? We never got to ride it because the teacher told the person who brought the horse, let's not do that. One of the kids is going to get hurt, because I was the one excited to ride it. The boys were all like, hey, can we poke it with sticks and stuff? And I was like, don't do that. That's a living animal. You're hurt, don't hurt it. Don't spook it. And the teacher was all like, leave them alone. They're boys, and I was neither group ever. I was so completely not part of any group for second and third grade that I would get chased in the recess area. There was this one cubby that had like shrubberies in it and stuff, but the walls dipped in that area, and you could chase other kids back there to beat them up and stuff. The boys would chase me back there in big groups, and I just would fight back. And instead of respecting me like the other gang of boys did in Washington who liked to touch girls in wrong ways, and rape them and stuff, these boys just wanted to punch and they wanted to kick. And I never lost a fight, even though there was like 10 of them and one of me. I never told my parents any of that because I didn't understand that wasn't normal. I look back on it now and I realize it wasn't normal. But I thought, this just must be how it is. That's how kids reacted to me, and that's how these kids are reacting to me, and they don't even live in the same place. But I didn't fit in to their play styles. I didn't want to do any of the things that the girls wanted to do, but I didn't look like any of the boys to be accepted by them. We left from there and went to Tennessee. My nickname was Roach. At first it was Eskimo because they naively thought that anyone from Alaska was an Eskimo, which no one even uses the word Eskimo anymore because it's offensive. But I tried to explain to them, I'm not an Inuit. I don't look like an Inuit. And they just didn't understand at all. And then finally the teacher asked them to stop because I wasn't Native American. And they well, okay, I wasn't an Indian is what they said, but we don't say that either anymore because it, again, is offensive. But back in those days, that's what it was. So then they understood that I wasn't an Indian. So then they didn't like me still, so they called me Roach. And it wasn't just my classmates. It went to every other class in every other grade, to the point where my baby brother started calling me Roach. And he got in big trouble for that, but he didn't understand what he was doing. He was just little. He didn't understand how hurtful that was. But my mother actually was very upset that he called me that. And I didn't like it. And the thing was, the only time they didn't do it was in front of the teacher. So I learned real fast how to become a teacher's pet. In the fourth grade is when I started becoming overly attached to my teachers. I continued that all the way through every single grade from that point on because the kids did not like me. I would usually find a way to make friends with one or two kids because we would have a common interest, or they felt sorry for me. Or with one girl, I just literally stood next to her in line and made sure I was next to her in line every time because I thought she was incredible. She was a girl who knew karate. She had her own Super Nintendo. She was like badass, and I had to be her friend because I wanted to do all of those things. Like, she had trophies for how good she was at karate. And she moved. It was sucky. My other friend was from India and was kind of rejected by the other kids because she was different. So she and I made friends somewhat well, but eventually she moved as well. Um, I learned a ton about respecting other cultures from her family, though. I would have this one friend who was an outcast, or I made friends with this one girl and she was super quiet all the time. And I should have been nicer to her because she was a genuinely kind person. But because she wasn't at all into anything boyish, I, I kind of stopped being friends with her, which was stupid of me because she was my only friend. But whatever. Meanwhile, like the teachers and stuff, they liked that I was smart. I got used as example in like gym class for things like, hey, basketball. The basketball team, they wanted me to join the basketball team and I wasn't allowed to, but I got used during gym class to show examples of doing basketball well. Like, I was so into playing all these different sports and stuff, but I wasn't allowed to actually do any of it. I I was very well liked by the adults, but I was not liked by the children. So you can imagine what my birthdays were like. And at first it wasn't that awful. I basically didn't have an eighth birthday for the most part. My ninth birthday was abysmal. My mother's hair caught on fire when she was lighting the candles, so she was already in a pissy mood. And the other kid, there was another girl who wanted one of my birthday presents. She wanted the stickers that I got. They were Lisa Frank stickers. And I didn't want to give them up. My mother got in some sort of self-righteous thing and was like, I wasn't being a good Christian or whatever, and made me give away my presents. I literally lost almost all my birthday presents because I had to give anyone who came my present because they wanted them. Um my 10th birthday, we were moving to Tennessee. I got a Lion King t-shirt because I wanted to be Simba, and I got promised that someday they would build my own room someday. Ta-da. My 11th birthday, uh, I was friends with a little girl who was much younger than me, and basically her parents and my birth mother and her pedophile husband were friends, and so their two children had to be friends with us. And she was significantly younger than me, but she was basically my only friend. And then I made friends with the karate girl at school and stuff. So I had a party that had what, two, three people at it, besides my brother. 12th birthday, there was literally no one to invite. My brothers awkwardly slid presents across the table while I sat curled in on myself, sobbing. 13th birthday, I didn't sob. 14th birthday, oh no, wait, 13th birthday, I didn't sob because it was at a roller skating rink. But basically, no one would have come if it wasn't at a roller skating rink. And even still, Um, the one and only friend I had's mom tried to give me some money for my birthday, and I couldn't take it because that wouldn't be a good Christian. So she got angry, and then I wasn't allowed to be friends with that girl anymore. My only friend, my one and only friend. Not that she really was upset about it, because that's about when Joseph Harris figured out that I was not like the other girls, and I wasn't into him, and every girl had a crush on him in the entire school except me. Must be a lesbian. And then that word started following me around. Um, yeah, it was 14, and I didn't sob. 15 was basically nothing at all, just nothing. 16, my mother tried. She took a cake to the school youth group and some presents from her to me. She had this thing that she could tell I didn't have any friends. She didn't know why I didn't have any friends. She didn't understand that none of the kids accepted me. And so she kept trying to basically create a situation where a kid would want to go. That was what the roller skating rink thing was. She brought the cake there. All of the kids had to go to this youth group thing at the church anyway, so why not half make it a youth group thing, but half make it a birthday party for me? And maybe one of the kids would become my friend because of that. No, it was my cake and it was my presents, but I just sort of awkwardly opened my presents in front of them, and they all were like, "Oh, cool, that's a cool item." Um, no one really gave it. They did the polite thing and said happy birthday and sang for the cake, and that was it. 17th birthday was at a boys' home, so all of the boys from the boys' home had to be there, and then a couple of girls from the church, who were all at least 2 years younger than me. Most of them more like 4 and 5 years younger than me, and they all sat around a big table, and I sat holding my baby sister and tried not to bawl my eyes out because I was being so severely abused, and I couldn't even look at any of them because none of them were like a peer. I will say that one of them was genuinely my friend, but she was also 5 years younger than me. And I sort of felt close to her, and I didn't feel close to her at all at the same time. It was very awkward. Most of the girls were 5 or more years younger than me. And then a bunch of boys who were here so that they wouldn't end up in juvenile like detention. Like yay me. My 18th birthday was I had no friends, not a single friend. So there was another girl who had a birthday on the same day as me, and she was at the church, and she was much younger than me, but she was a nice girl, like a genuinely sweetheart. And my mother was like, "You guys can combine birthdays," and I don't know if she guilt tripped the other girl's mom into it or what, but there was a big giant party, and they like rented out the whole church or something for it, and the kids just took over, and they all came to this big giant joint birthday party where every single kid came for the other girl. I spent that entire party either being teased and mocked and laughed at, um, told that the one girl who had been pretending to be my friend up to that point, she basically said, boys don't like you, and you don't like boys. I like boys, so I don't want to be friends with you. And then I just sat in a corner by myself alone, crying in the dark corner of one room where the kids just kept running around, playing, having fun, throwing stuff at each other, eating cake, opening presents. Nothing. Not a single kid even looked in my direction. I literally just nothing. Like this is the birthday parties, let alone the depression that comes with them. Birthdays for me are shit because they're just a reminder of how no one was glad that I was born. Your birthday is supposed to be the day that people are glad that you were born. And you share some cake together, and they give you attention. No one gave me attention on my birthdays. Everyone was there to give each other attention. And there is no lonelier feeling in the entire world than being completely alone when in the middle of a crowd. And that's literally the feeling that a birthday is for me when I was growing up. I was miserable. I had no friends. Kids didn't like me. They didn't understand me. I didn't act the way that they expected. Over the years, my dad would take us back to visit those friends that we had had in Washington, because I think he understood that those were like our best friends we ever had. But it never stopped being that those girls who had been my girlfriends were slightly flirtatious with me or whatever, and that I was separate from them. I was not part of their friend group or whatever. Not because I had moved, but because I didn't make sense to them. They couldn't understand me. And I don't know if they could tell that I'd always had crushes on them and that never went away. I don't know if they could tell that I could tell that they still liked me a little bit, but they felt terrible about it, because at that point they had gotten old enough to know that the things that we had done before were not acceptable to Christianity. I don't know if, I mean, like, they would ask me stuff about myself and about my life when we got older, and just look at me like I was crazy. Like, they didn't understand. Why wasn't I crushing on boys? Why couldn't we talk about boys? Why was I wearing this big baggy sweater instead of like a cute dress or something? Why was I not making sense to them? What, I had never put on makeup before ever? I didn't want to? What? Like, it was so frustrating for them, because they wanted to relate to me, but they couldn't relate to me. And I didn't understand why. I didn't know what was wrong with me. I hated myself so completely and utterly because I did not understand why. No one could be my friend. And I have been thinking about all of this before I even started talking about it on here right now. I've been thinking about all these things, and I'm still not in a giant depression. It wasn't even just that I was getting beat around. It wasn't even just that we were poverty. It wasn't even just, the abusive stuff. It was the constant state of being rejected. And I've never I've never gotten to a point where I felt like my birthday would be about me being accepted. Even once I hit adulthood, my mom found out about what my birthdays were like, and she went out of her way to try to change my birthday from being this sad, pathetic little thing that, I dread, to being like, hey, we're just going to build a memory together as a family. And your birthday isn't this sad, pathetic little thing, because we're going to go do this fun, exciting thing. And the first, like, I would say, like, 5 years, I wept every single day on my birthday, often in front of my parents, and they just kept trying to be happy, and my mom just would keep going on about, hey, let's go get a milkshake, she she tried so hard. And then I got a little older, and instead of doing fancier things, we did less fancier things. So instead of me blowing glass because of me wanting to learn blacksmithing. Um, we do a corn maze. Like it's less fancy, but it's still interesting and stuff. Well, when we moved here, you know, I was just miserable at first, but finally last year. So yeah, it would have started last year, not the year before. Okay. Anyway, it was the year before that year, I think, that my birthday was less depressing. Anyway, um but last year my birthday was significantly less depressing. My girlfriend, we went apple picking, we went out to a farm, saw some animals, had like milk straight from the farm, and had like milkshakes straight from the farm and ice cream or whatever it was. And we got donuts that were apple donuts, and we got like all this stuff, and tried to have fun with it and everything. And she made creme brulee from scratch that was absolutely incredible, and got all these little mini desserts, and we had a feast of mini desserts and stuff, and it was nice. And I was still depressed. I still got depressed, but it was not terrible. But that's sort of how it's been for most of my adulthood, is that I still get depressed, but it's not terrible. Um it's basically a family event. Like my birthday is just sort of there's no reason to even attempt to invite friends, because all of my friends are long distance. I don't have friends who are in person. And I realize that part of that is because of how I grew up as a child. I realize that if I make friends in person, that means they don't come to my parties. I thought that once I was an adult, maybe that would change. But when I was in college, didn't happen. When I graduated college, my parents threw a massive graduation party for me because all these people said they were coming, and then two people showed up, and they awkwardly looked at each other the whole time because they didn't know what to do, because why were they there? No one else was there. No one even remembered me. I had a couple of friends in person for like maybe the next 7 years after that, but my birthday was just sort of a thing where they would put something small in a bag, toss it at me, and then go back about their day. It was almost like, like when you are walking along and you see a dog, and instead of stopping to like give that dog attention, even if he's a very good dog, super fluffy, adorable, you just sort of be like, "Oh, nice dog," and you just walk along. Um and the dog's like wagging its tail and its tongue's out, and it's like, excited to see you, and it just wants you to come pet its head and scratch its ears for a few seconds, and instead you're just like, ah, ah. I don't know why I'm doing that voice for the disregard voice, but apparently that's what disregard sounds like. Anyway, I have long distance friends, and we talk once in a great while. I have never been close with other people. And part of that is probably because I have had issues with friendship. I have had issues because I am trans. And there was never an explanation for it before. Why the girls would call me a know it all, and they would act like that was such a terrible thing, that I liked learning and that I liked education and stuff. But then the boys, if I tried to hang out with them, they'd be like, "No, I don't want a girl around." And I'd be like, "I'm not gonna act like a girl." And they'd be like, "You won't be able to help it." And it's just like, sometimes the boys would go out to like the river and swing off of ropes and stuff like that, or things like that, and I couldn't go, and I knew I couldn't go because they wouldn't be able to go. If I wanted to go too, they wouldn't be able to go have fun, so I just stayed by myself. I learned really young that if they wanted to have a friend group, I'm trying to remember how young I was when I figured that out. They could have friends and I couldn't, was basically what I understood. I must have been like 9. I definitely understood it by 10. So somewhere in 3rd grade, they had friends and I had to learn to stay away from their friends so that they could keep their friends. Because their friends didn't want to hang out with me. I wasn't a boy. And every once in a while, once we were teenagers, they'd make friends so well with a boy that he would learn to just accept me being around, and then I could hang out a little bit, but only a little. For the majority part, I needed to just go recluse in my room, and they could hang out with their friends. And that way their friends wouldn't be questioning things or wondering why they have to, like, be on tiptoe. You know, they don't want a girl there. They want to just be able to just laugh and act out and roughhouse. And I wanted to do all those things too, but I couldn't because it's too awkward to even attempt to fathom doing that with me in this fucking form. And I didn't understand. I didn't know why nothing made any sense. It didn't work. Why? I was so tormented by why. This is the first year of my entire life that I understand why my birthdays were so freaking miserable. And it wasn't just that we were poor, and it wasn't just that we moved around a lot, and it wasn't just that I was being abused. I understand why other kids didn't accept me. Because I was somewhere in the middle, and they want one side or the other. It's very hard for them to accept in the middle because they can see themselves on one side and they can see other kids who are on the other side. Their identity, their gender identity that they recognize inside their own head makes sense to them. Someone who's in the middle, it's harder for them to get. Especially when I was younger. There was no such thing as an acceptance for non-binary or something like that. Uh, non-gender, being genderqueer or whatever. Like, none of that existed at all when I was a child. When I was a child, there was male, female, and hermaphrodite. And hermaphrodites were expected to pick, or else their parents would pick. The only reason it would be acceptable to change your mind later on in life was if you were one, which is why I wanted to be one so badly. And even then, a lot of the time, it still wasn't accepted, which is just mind-boggling to me. There are so many times that someone who now would be considered intersex, and it fully within their rights to choose their gender because they have both parts, it was not accepted because that meant people had to change. When I was a kid, there was so much ignorance about stuff because it just wasn't studied at all. It wasn't anything anyone would consider. Again, especially in the isolated parts of the world, the country even that I grew up in. Isolated with ignorance and rigidity. I don't hate any of the people who've rejected me in my life. I understand why. I understand. I don't hate any of them. But I also don't feel like this massive depression. And I don't know if it's because I understand for the first time in my entire life. I mean, I'm about to turn 36, and I finally, for the first time in my entire life, understand a problem I've had my whole life. Um, I don't know if it's that or if it's just understanding has made it to where I can accept it, or that I have like some sort of hope for the future that once I transition and I make some guy friends and stuff, maybe I could have friends in person who aren't long distance friends. Women seem to gravitate toward me because I make them feel safe. And women struggle to find masculine figures who make them feel safe. Um, so I'm not surprised by that, but men still, the majority of them, like 90% of them, feel awkward around me. I feel like a lot of my friends are still basically the same kind of friend to me that those little girls were, where it's not as big of an age gap a lot of the times, although a lot of the times it still is actually bigger age gaps. A lot of my friends are like in their early 20s, but I make them feel safe. And I'm like a role model or something for them. I'm a leader and a go getter for morality and treating people well and stuff. And they like that. So they're drawn to me, just like the little girls were drawn to me. I don't reject them just because they're young or because they lack some maturity or whatever. I'm not that kind of person. I see them as a person instead of as their age. And I'm like this bear, you know, cute and fluffy and yet very guardian. Like, I'm a guardian. And when I transition, I don't know if women will still see me that way because I will be finally not somewhere not fitting in the middle. But it opens up a door to possibly having in person friends that could do things that I would like to do. Like I was watching my spouse and I watch a lot of Disney movies together. And we were watching Big Hero 6, and that kid, oh my gosh, he looked exactly like I wanted to look when I was younger, except for the black hair. Like the baggy cargo shorts and the cool sneakers and the hoodie and like a graphic tee. Like, I wanted to look exactly like that boy. Like the scruffy hairdo, exactly like that little boy in that movie. Except for the hair would have been the more like blondish brownish red color that I have going on. Um, so bad. I wanted to look exactly like that boy. And if I did, if I had looked like that little boy when I was younger, I would have had friends. I would have had lots of friends. Because I had the kind of personality that I would have had lots of friends. But I didn't know. Those kids didn't know. No one around me knew. Again, when people understood that I liked girls, the only word that anyone knew to call it was lesbian. There was no such thing as transgender. So I don't hate anyone. I'm not angry at anyone. If anything, I'm kind of relieved because there wasn't anything wrong with me that whole time. I just didn't fit for reasons that I didn't understand. I had all these male hormones going on in a body that everyone else perceived to be as a girl's. And I had all of these male directives and instincts and stuff, and I wanted to do all of this other stuff that none of it was like befitting a girl or whatever. And some of it was okay for a boy or a girl to do. And so those were the things that ended up getting clung to. You know, I loved to draw. I liked to read books. And, those were things that girl or a boy could do. So I just hide by myself and do those things because that was the things that got me not in trouble. The teachers didn't mind that I was a know-it-all because to them it just meant I was smart. Turned out I was apparently very smart, but bleh, to being smart. Although, maybe I wouldn't feel like bleh to being smart if I had been a boy. Because it wasn't acceptable for a girl to be in a position of authority in the way that I grew up. It wasn't acceptable for a girl to be smarter than all the guys in the room. Because, women were supposed to be subject to the men. Like, the way that I was raised was girls were basically groomed to become wives someday and pop out babies and shit. And I didn't want that. I wanted to be the one who the wife wanted to marry. Like, there's so much of my life that would have been fine. Like, maybe my parents would have beat us around some still or whatever, but so much of my life would have been fine if I had somehow been able to access any of this as a child or anything. But again, how in the world could that have ever been possible? Like, it's just ridiculous the sheer volume of impact that being trans has had on my life. And I don't know, maybe I'm so busy with the trans stuff that I just don't feel depressed yet. I don't know. Maybe it's because my appointment is on my birthday. I feel like my birthday's kind of not really going to be much of a day. I mean, my spouse has appointments too. It's going to be a day where we deal with appointments. It's not really going to be enough time to be like some sort of big giant celebration. So honestly, we've talked about having it like the day before because the day of is just going to be full. Or even maybe 2 days before or something, because there's just no time for all that. I don't know. I don't know. It's very strange because it's literally the first time in my entire life. If I don't get depressed at some point here, it will be the first time in my entire life since I was 8 years old. And I'm turning 36. And that's like, just wow. I don't know. Maybe it gives me a little hope that they're right. And I mean, they should be right. I've literally gotten a second opinion. Um, but that my depression will go away when I'm on testosterone and that things could improve with me transitioning as far as my depression goes. Like, it's mind-boggling. But it could be true. I've had chronic depression my entire life. I've had predictable cycles of depression my entire life. Until now. When I'm transitioning. And I haven't even taken any testosterone yet. It's just that I'm going to. It's like I'm stunned. It's kind of like a much bigger shock and excitement as when me letting my body hair grow out helped with my dermatillomania, and now I hardly pick at all, like almost none. Like I'm treat myself a zillion times better, and it's like that. It's it just sort of happened. It wasn't something I consciously thought about. Oh, hey, let's actively try not to be depressed this year. Um, any more than it was like, hey, let's actively try not to pick at myself this anymore. Like it just sort of. How crazy would it be? How crazy is it that apparently a lot of the extremely negative health things that I've dealt with in my life are attached to non acceptance? And the thing is I'm still dealing with non acceptance, but now I know why they're not accepting me, so I don't give a shit. I know why. Maybe that's what it is. They're attached to feeling like there's something grossly wrong with you that is a giant mystery. And now I know there's nothing wrong with me. It's a completely resolvable medical thing. Like, I am considered not having mental health gender dysphoria um, only. I'm considered to have medical gender dysphoria. And that's big. And not all states have passed laws that even allow that differentiation. Um, you know, our country's so behind on so many things. But in this state, it's completely accepted, and I am completely accepted, which means that doctors can help me. Help me with the thing that I needed help with my whole life. And I just didn't know what it was. I feel like I feel like when they find out what causes fibromyalgia and how to truly cure it or treat it, even that all the people who have fibromyalgia, they're going to feel so much relief and vindication and get so much help. And every doctor who brushed them aside or waved them off or was like, oh, you're not really in that much pain, or oh, you're exaggerating, or whatever it is, that they're going to feel the way I feel now. I don't think they're going to hate those doctors, but I think they're going to be like, you know what? In your face. In your face. Whether they find out that I'm intersex or not, once all the testing starts, that I have to try not to think about too hard, or else I will panic. But once it starts, whether they find out I'm intersex or not, I don't know. I still feel somewhat that sense of in your face affirmation. It wasn't me. There was something wrong with the village, not the kid. And I don't hate the village, but also the village can go to their deathbed knowing that they were wrong. I don't give a shit about the village. The village failed the child. The child didn't fail the village. I don't know. Maybe I will still get depressed. I don't know. But, I mean, even if I, say, a week from now get depressed all of a sudden or something, that's still a very short, again, grand depression compared to usual. Like, when Peaches first met me and I got super depressed, and she was like, "You don't normally act like this." And I'm like, "I'm sorry. This is just part of the first time we met." I was like, "I'm so happy that you're here, and I'm so happy to be with you. I'm so happy because the first time we met was September, like the whole month of September. She came to visit me because she lived in another state. I was like, I'm so happy about you. But also, there were times that I was like crying in a corner. And she was just like, I don't understand. You're so happy, but you're like, not." And I was like, I'm so sorry. This happens every year, you know? It actually was much less bad that year simply because she was there and we were meeting for the first time and everything. And it was so like lovely and wonderful. But I took her camping for the first time. She'd never been camping in a tent and stuff on the beach with seashells. She collected so many seashells. Like, took her to restaurants and took her to ride on a choo-choo train. She'd never ridden on a choo-choo train before. Like, took her to the, corn maze was that year, so she'd never done like a big giant, harvest festival thing. Her family didn't really celebrate Halloween. So, but it was like such a good time, and yet I still, even that happy, dealt with the depression. So, right now I'm not that happy, but I'm not depressed. But I'm hopeful that in the future I will be happy. And who knows, maybe hope is all it takes. I don't know. And I don't think it's universal. I think just because whatever's working for me is working for me, that I'm not sure how to nail it on the head what it is. Um, I'm not saying that will magically work for everyone who's ever been depressed before. That would be anecdotal. Least valid evidence in science. But I don't know. I just, I'll take it. I mean, I don't want to be in a big giant grand depression any more than the next person. No one wants to be in that state. So, I'll take it. But yeah, I was thinking about it. I was like, wow, September's halfway over and I haven't gotten depressed. What? Cool. Cool.